Ho, ho, ho. GHAZZY TV here in a pervy porn stash version of Santa here due to a goddamn sub goal coming up to you with another Path of Exile 2 video. I'm definitely not deleting this later. However, in this video, I will be talking about the Skeletal Reaver build. Now, a lot of people have been asking me about this, and apparently there's a rumor going around that this is the new meta. So obviously, the Minion guy of Path of Exile has to take a look at it, and I've been playing with this before, and I made my statements. Now I'm going to make a video on it. The statement is this. This is not meta, and it will not be able to compete with the meta. However, it does have some pretty cool things. I believe this will actually do a bit more comfortable bossing experiences. However, it will suck big D when it comes to clearing compared to Arsonist, which is still reign supreme. I'm going to go through the build in detail. I'm going to talk about it. But one thing that is really good with this specific build is a couple things, actually. One, same gear for the most part compared to the Arsonist. Changing between the two builds is very seamless. The main difference is that you'd rather have an actual Malice scepter instead of a Rattling scepter. I'll explain this in a little bit more detail in a bit later. Changes to the skill tree is very minimal as well. Instead of like the energy shield stuff that we talked about before and taking this node, because we're going to use brutality, more about that later, is that we're moving a couple points on the tree, and we're compensating that with getting critical strike nodes in here, and we're taking the critical strike nodes in this part of the tree. The build already does so much damage, but it's kind of nice. It's kind of comfortable to play, as long as you're playing in an open world map. Open wide spaces for your minions to thrive. You also want to run significantly higher amount of clerics. I'd say 3 clerics. If you can get 4 without that costing you a Reaver, go for it. But 3 clerics I think is kind of comfortable when you're running over 10 minions or 10 Reavers. You want at least 1 skeletal sniper, which is going to explode the enemy's armor through the use of its gas cloud ability, which the ignited enemies made by your actual doggo will basically break the enemy armor. That's basically how we're going to do it. However, doorways, narrow hallways, crypt maps specifically. Do those maps with this build and you will suffer a lot. Clear speed, basically the game doesn't have any melee splash support. The collateral cleave area coverage that melee units have is really bad. So compared to Arsonist, they are horrible at clearing, but I do believe they will outperform on single target boss fights. Unlike Arsonist, you will not be using SRS. Unlike Arsonist, you will not be using flammability. So you can't really effectively just change the minions on the fly. So you're going to have a different setup for it if you do wish to play with them. But the best thing about this is that a lot of people play the game, they might not have the best pieces in the entire universe. Shout out to Starforge, by the way. Check them out. Therefore, you might want to play with something that is less intensive on your rig. You don't use Flame Wall, less shit going on your screen. So this build would actually fit very well for those. I've also said several times in the past on stream that once they fix, or if they fixes the convocation-like ability or minions teleporting back to you instead of dying when you outrun them, giving less body blocking situation happening with your minions and or better cleave coverage or melee splash support to these minions, I think Reavers will be the best build in the game for minions right now. But in the current state of the game, Arsonist is outperforming them. This is not meta, even though there's a rumor going around with that. They're not meta, but they are performing. I'm going to show you a map in a moment here, which is going to be a Vault Factory, which is not a very good map to run in. However, it is corrupted, it is irradiated, and there is a boss, and I will run a tier 16. Sadly, I couldn't find or make a higher rarity version, which is harder mods on it than this. So this is what I got. However, you've seen this guy build in a previous video I made where we use Arsonist. The build is, you know, you're not going to die. The build is super tanky. So you know that. But we're going to run this map when it's an 82 area map. As you can see here, it is extremely good. It's the hardest type of content you can run at the current state. Let's talk about the details of the build first. The drafts, sorry. I learned this from a YouTube comment. The pronunciation is drafts. Venoms or poisons that you get in the acts. You should target those for leveling build. I don't know if they're ever going to make us able to change them. I went for Mana Regen and Chaos Resistance, which actually plays in favor for the hybrid approach, which I'm doing. And I believe that most of the footages on the Arsonist build was the CI style. I do prefer the hybrid, where we actually want to cap our Chaos Resistance. Skill trees remains the same as the hybrid, which is going for Beta's Hand and Beta's Will. And the tree and everything will be linked in the descriptions below, of course. And I'm going to go through the skills for you. But first, let's check the gear. You'll run a Omen Scepter, simply for the extra crit strike chance. This is critical strike weakness. More about that in a moment. You'll see my action bar has a little Eye of Winter down there, which is to emphasize this. Level of minion skills, most important stat. Second most important stat is Spirit. I have a really good scepter now. Helmet, energy shield. If you're able to get some life on it, fantastic. And then energy shield plus level of minion skills, super, super important. And then obviously res or attributes. Now for this version of the build, you actually do give a shit about attributes. I'm currently sitting at 211 intelligence, which should be more than enough to enable me to use a level 20 skill gem. I'll need a little bit of dexterity for my support gems, and I need the rest of my stats going into strength. So any other strat I get should be strength, as I don't need more intelligence for my gems. Shield, important stat here, similar to before. It's actually the same gear as the last video. Basically max resistances, attributes, and suffixes. Prefix, most important part here, is increased chance to block, so that you get over 40% block chance from your shield. This is how we block cap ourselves. Life, armor, energy shield, really good. We're going to be ramping this. Boots, movement speed, most important part. Energy shield, then if you can get a life on, grab it. Then resistances and attributes after that. The same thing with the gloves. It's just life, energy shield, resistances, attributes, in that order, essentially. The belt, for the hybrid version, you want life. For CI, you don't. I think we're going to stick with a hybrid for this build, personally. You could actually have a better experience with CI with this compared to the Arsonist, simply because you don't need to have 11 freaking Reavers. They might not even all be on the target, but I prefer the hybrid either way. Again, resistances, but the hybrid will want Chaos Res. Rings, same thing there. As long as you're hybrid, you want to have a life mod. If you get rarity, great, but focus on getting your res and attributes covered. The mana region is not a bad modifier to have, because we're actually going to be casting a lot on mana with this build, but it's not really a big deal. Same thing here, life, mana, and go from there. Amulet, however, there's a little bit of a discussion here. Obviously, we'll be oiling Flashy Deflection, which is down here on the bottom right corner. This is Greed, Guilt, Greed in that order. Gets you block chance to cap ourselves. And what we're going to do here is that we want to prioritize level of minion skills, then Spirit, then life or energy shield, then resistances or attributes. That's kind of like the order I would say for the amulet. And the jewels in your gear is going to look like this. Two modifiers that affects the build. One, block chance. The other one, increased defenses from equipped shield. You want to grab as many of these as possible. Grab the extra block nodes to make sure that you get as close to or at 75% block, which is the cap, and that's going to give you a ton of survivability. All right, going through the skills, and then we're going to play the game. Malice, if you have Spirit left over, you could chuck in something like Clarity, I believe it is. Let's see if I have one. So if we look at Clarity as a support for this, and you do this, as you can see here, it's supposed to be +10 to Spirit, but I don't believe this is not actually applying. It's not changing any of the state of this, but it actually does. So they didn't say it. That's kind of awkward. What you could do is, in my case, I don't need to run 4 clerics. We already know that. So I can drop one of my clerics and have, like I said before, 3 clerics for above 11. This allows me to have a little bit of extra mana region. I could even verify whether or not I could put a vitality in there. Again, it all depends on your current state of spirit, right? So if I do this, I now lost another one. That means I'm not really going to run vitality. I'd rather have this set up personally. Make sure that I have the count ready. Good. So I'll run Clarity just to help the mana region a little bit instead of a cleric. Don't really need it. So maybe I'll just drag it off and just run the extra cleric, since we are going to sacrifice minions. It's a matter of personal preference, but that's your options. So that means either support chance for vitality or clarity in the Malice, or you run no support at all. Raise Shield, don't use it, don't care. Summon Infernal Hellhound. There's a couple of variations. I'll tell you what I've been running. I'm running Fire Exposure with Strip Away. Mostly this is for your bombing of your skeletal snipers to reduce as much armor as possible, because that actually converts to fire damage, and the damage of it, the ability, is breaking armor. It's a bit complicated. Magnified Effect, I have that to get the AoE as big as possible. Main, to make the enemy slower and less evasion rating on hitting. And I'm using Lacerate, 50% chance for the dog to create a bleed on the enemy. We don't care about the damage of the bleed, we care about making the enemy bleed. Blink, same support as before. Second Wind, Ingenuity. That allows you to have double blinks like this. And the Second Wind lowers that increased cooldown that it provides. Skeletal Cleric, we run Last Gasp. Doesn't really matter. Elemental Army, doesn't really matter. They're like Giga over Captain Rest anyway. So, yeah, you know, just chuck it in there if you have it. Vulnerability, I'm running Heightened Curse, which is the increased effect. And I'm running Hex Bloom to make the curse spread. Before, I was running Focused Curse to make it pop even faster. The problem is now it costs 260 mana, and it's pretty nasty in my opinion. If you don't do that, it's only costing 218 mana, which is something that I personally prefer, because the Pain Offering Costs quite a lot of mana. But you could run Focus Curse, make it pop faster if you really want to. I like it, but it's a matter of personal preference. Pain Offering, Persistence to make the last duration longer because it costs so much mana. You'll run Font of Rage to make it generate rage. You'll run Expanse to make it have a larger radius. And then Inspiration for the mana cost. And if you are fine with the HP sustain, which you could be if you put in a Vitality in the Malice instead and drop one of your Clerics, you could run Ablation. Because if you do run Ablation on the Pain Offering, it cuts off your life a little bit. And that can be compensated by running something like a Vitality Aura for sacrificing one of your clerics. And it will look like this. So I pop one of those, you'll see my life read is going to be slightly better. I'm personally not a big fan of this, as you might have noticed. But that is an option, so instead I actually put the Inspiration into the offering set of Ablation just to keep that cost down. Grim Face, no supports. This is just your energy shield sustain, and you're killing enemies. Skeletal Reaver support is Heft, because it's overpowered. Heavy Swing for more physical damage. Martial Temper for attack speed. We run Brutality, which makes us not be able to deal Chaos or Elemental damage from the Reavers. That is why we're not taking this node, which gives you Fizz as Chaos damage, because the Reavers won't actually be able to deal that damage. And the last support is a Bloodlust, because we're allowing our doggo to have 50% chance to hit a Creative Bleed, which we then use to do more damage. Skeletal Snipers is Corrosion to make the poison damage dealt break armor, Demolisher to break even more armor, and then, you know, their regular hits will break armor, and then Scattershot for more projectiles so we get this even more amplified, and then more damage from the ability that we're using for the Poison Clouds through Bidding, which is a new support recently introduced. And that's how we break this shit. Now to the more interesting part before we do the map. Eye of Winter, which we're going to use Arcane Tempo for more cast speed, Mobility to make us able to move a little bit faster whilst we're actually casting the ability, Acceleration to make the projectiles fly very, very, very fast, and then we have Unleash to get more projectiles. The reason for this is because this applies critical weakness on hit. This makes enemies take a higher chance of becoming crits. The crits of getting crit. And that's about it. That's it. Let me show you the map play, and I'll talk a little bit and yap on stream and whilst you guys watch this video. So again, 82, hardest map con that you can do. The map is not super difficult, but I'll show you, and you will very, very early notice why Arsonists are better clearing, and then you will see the boss at the end. Defensively, the build's actually really, really nice. It's not a problem at all. And here's the problem with this is the corridors and whatnot. So you can use the Enrage ability quite consistently for more efficiency, because we have the clerics to resurrect them, and that's about it. And then you just pop these abilities from Eye of Winter to get that crit up and running, and that's the play. But you will very clearly notice the lack of clear because of the splash, or the lack of splash therefore, which will impact the generic clearing of the build, and that's why this will not be meta, or you cannot consider this to be meta, but it is to some degree competitive with the Arsonist. Another thing to point out is that they are indeed melee specters. Swords are melee units, which means they have to walk up and actually hit the enemies before they do their damage, which, you know, the Arsonists do not because they're ranged. That's how it goes. So there's many factors that is impacting the general clear speed of this build. As you can see, they're just running. They don't really have that good splash, so I'm just sitting here walking around waiting for them to hit them, whereas an Arsonist would have already cleared that room 5 hours ago. It's going to be fun to show you guys the actual single target of this build, though, because that's the part where they actually start shining. As you can see here, we have them stuck in a doorway. If my minions were Arsonists and they were stuck in this doorway, what would happen is they would actually shoot from the doorway and kill this pack. Yet another reason why the Arsonist is outperforming the Reavers significantly. Now, I do hope they fix this sooner rather than later. It doesn't mean that the build is not playable or that it's competitive, but it is one of those factors that makes the build far from being considered meta. I want to point that out. They can't even reach those guys. Look at that. Frustrating. Very frustrating. And more times than not, the command control for them doesn't even get them through the doors. So these are the reasons, part of the handful of reasons why Arsonist is going to be significantly smoother and better to play. However, it is taking a lot more effort and pressure on your rig, for example. So there's, you know, pros and cons of the entire approach of it. But this is a couple of the major reasons why you cannot say that these builds where this is meta. The boss, however, is going to be very fun to show you. But for those of you who keep telling me that, oh, you can switch between Arsonists and the Reavers, I talked about this earlier. Not a good thing, because there's so many things that you're changing. The skill tree is part of it, but you can actually let go of the skill tree changes. It's a little bit of a messy job to switch your entire setup with skills to suddenly do the Reavers instead of Arsonists. Most importantly is that quite a few of the support gems you're using are different on different skills, which literally means that you'd literally be switching a ton of things around just to have a little bit more damage on bosses. I will say, though, that I really like the Reavers. I've always liked them from what we tested so far, but meta, no. Competitive, sure. And if they actually fix these things, like, you see this, I have to walk back and forth because I can't kill them. An Arsonist would be able to stand up here and shoot in every corner and be able to kill these enemies. I am unable to do this with this build right now, so I have to, like, move them down because they get stuck in the corner. Now I got the box open. That's Pillar of the Cage Gods, actually. No, it's not Sentry. I'll have to look at that later. I thought it was. So again, it's just a lot of these small quality of life features that is just making the Arsonist completely outshining something like this. And it just emphasizes on why this is not going to be a competitive meta build, but it is a competitive and functional, high-performing build. So I do want to point that out and emphasize. I just want to underline that. And here's the boss. Now you can see the actual part of what this build actually scales on, or thrives on, rather. There you go. Get a curse up. He's already stunned. Would be good if they could actually get to the targets. As you can see, they're running around. We're getting a crit weakness. I mean, the stun. So there's yet another issue that I didn't actually mention before. You can see some of the minions weren't able to even hit the target. So that was only a small portion of my minions being able to hit the guy. And that was enough to do that damage to stun him that consistently. It's still good. That's a big boss target. And I couldn't get all of my minions to hit him. But that's basically the build. I don't have to give you more content than this. Just, keep yapping for the sake of a longer video. But I do appreciate you guys watching the video. I hope you guys liked the video in general. And if you did, hit the like button, subscribe for more content. And I will leave a little Pastebin link. Just open it up in a web browser and I'll have all the details there in the descriptions as well. Obviously, I'll be posting all my written guides on ice events as soon as their site is ready. But yeah, like I said, stop yapping. I'll see you guys in the next one. Till then, stay safe and keep rocking.